Welcome to the Konovision podcast, the spirit of storytelling. I am Jim Conrad, aka Kono, and today on episode 9, we tell stories about the nature of reality. Yes, I'm aiming high. We'll ask some questions around that, as well as have an interview with a good friend, John Good, businessman, entrepreneur, former television news anchor, media personality, and part of a very famous broadcasting family here in Vancouver, son of Bill Good Sr. and brother of Bill Good Jr. That's a bit later. Also an essay from Julio Olalla about the various crises of the Western mind. But first, let's talk about the nature of reality, the reality of nature, and the question, are we both inside and outside of both? Our environment of the senses sees, hears, tastes, smells, and touches the fusion of nature into a reality that we bring into consciousness. We call it perception. But do we really understand nature? Do we really understand reality? And what are the limits of our conscious and unconscious minds? Is there an objective reality independent of thought? Well, what do the thinkers think about all this? Werner Heisenberg, the famous physicist, and Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst, both shaped 20th century thought by challenging rigid materialism, finding common ground between quantum physics and depth psychology. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and Jung's archetypes both suggest that fundamental underlying structures govern reality, often appearing in symbolic or mathematical form. While Jung worked more closely with physicist Wolfgang Pauli on the concept of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences bridging matter and psyche, or as G.K. Chesterton said of coincidences, they are spiritual puns. This circle of thinkers, Heisenberg, Pauli, and Jung, sought to unite science and spirituality. Jung's concept of synchronicity and Heisenberg's quantum mechanics challenged traditional cause and effect, pointing toward a non-local, interconnected world. Heisenberg's work, like Jung's, highlights that the tenuous nature of reality requires recognizing the limitations of purely objective observation. Here's a quote from Heisenberg. "The first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will turn you into an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you." Yes, God, the gods, the unsolvable puzzle, the imponderable enigma, shrouded in mystery, smothered in secret sauce. And finally this from Charles B. Newcomb, author of Psychic Philosophy and the Awakening of Spiritual Consciousness. "Let us move on and step out boldly, though it be into the night and we can scarcely see the way. A higher intelligence than the mortal sees the road before us." We live in interesting times, challenging times, as a result of the coming together of several significant factors. This moment in time, right here, right now, is turning out to be especially consequential. Here in the West, after centuries of relative stability and consistency in our ways of thinking, we are beginning to look around and see other possibilities. This new openness is clearly related to a series of crises that have been emerging in Western culture. First, the crisis of epistemology, the theory of knowledge, especially with regard to its methods, validity, and scope. Epistemology is the investigation of what distinguishes justified belief from opinion. Consider for a moment the paradigm of rationalism that has permeated Western culture ever since Plato. The far-reaching results of this paradigm, so clearly seen in the extraordinary achievements of science and its sister disciplines of mathematics and logic, along with the use of the scientific method, are surely not debatable. However, the truly extraordinary evolution of Western science also carries with it two core epistemological assumptions of great significance. The first assumption is basically that of Scientism, the belief that science and scientific thinking alone can determine what is to be accepted as real, as well as determining the scope of what can be known. Under this presupposition, everything must be either subject to the laws of physics, chemistry, biology, and other scientific disciplines, or else not be considered an objective experience. Spirituality, long regarded with deep suspicion, if not contempt by science, and even aesthetics, intuition, emotion, and morality, have been reduced to the status of variable functions of brain chemistry, interacting with certain macrobiological laws of human evolution. Furthermore, in addition to telling us what can be known, science also dictates how this can be known. Either the acquisition of knowledge proceeds according to the well-established precepts of the scientific method, or if not, it is to be regarded as being of secondary importance, or even absolute bullshit. The three central parameters of this method are objectivism, the assumption that there is an objective universe that can be explored and known scientifically; positivism, the assumption that only what is physically observable counts as scientifically real; and reductionism, the assumption that scientific explanation proceeds by explaining more complex phenomena in terms of more elementary ones, or, in other words, the whole in terms of its parts. Adhering to these principles results in whole realms of human experience being left out, or alternatively, in the belief that the systematic exploration of these realms can no longer lay claim to the official designation of knowledge, and that any prestige that naturally accompanies this scientific principle is lost. Meanwhile, as human beings, our deep desire for wisdom and wholeness remains unfulfilled. The second epistemological assumption that underlies Western science is that knowledge is to be acquired primarily for the sake of manipulating the physical world, for dominating nature. As Sir Francis Bacon, the father of the scientific method, insisted, the universe is seen simply as a resource to be exploited, and so our whole focus becomes one of figuring out how to accomplish this domination effectively. Paradoxically, oh, and by the way, a paradox, as defined by G.K. Chesterton, is the truth standing on its head, trying to draw attention to itself. So yes, paradoxically, our very obsession to dominate and control nature is leading to a situation that seems increasingly dangerous and out of control. We appear to be completely unable to restrain our tendency to pollute the atmosphere, poison our lakes and streams, destroy our forests, and decimate our rich inheritance of animal life. Tragically, we have almost completely lost the more primordial view of the world as a place of dwelling, a place we feel inherently connected to and at home in. Now comes the crisis of capitalism. As a result of this manipulative stance toward the world, we have become very good at two things: acquiring knowledge and acting effectively in order to put this knowledge to good use. It's scarcely surprising, then, that technology and business management have become two of the driving forces shaping our culture. As we continue to move forward into this relatively new century, we can see the impact of these forces pervading almost every aspect of our daily lives. The success of technology-based companies, or in other words, modern capitalism, can seemingly no more be doubted than the success of the rationalistic scientific paradigm that underlies them. Indeed, since the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, signaling the end of communism and the collapse of the Soviet Empire, capitalism appears to have emerged triumphant as the virtually unchallengeable model, a model that most countries long to imitate, with the G7 countries and others as the clear intellectual, political, technological, industrial, and military leaders. What has become inherent in modern capitalism is a deep commitment to growth for its own sake and for the ceaseless accumulation of wealth and power, often with little regard for other values. What we're witnessing now is a gap between the well-off and the poor that is growing daily and may be approaching a dangerous point of instability. Today, roughly 3% of the human population owns close to 50% of all human wealth. Business organizations today are obsessed with a single concern: how to push the rate of growth and profit ever higher. Unlike nature, which appears to be governed by a law of dynamic homeostasis, dictating when a process of growth or change should move forward, slow down, or stop altogether, present-day capitalism appears never to recognize a point of, "This is enough." Imagine a CEO of a company addressing an AGM and saying, "We're not growing anymore. Sorry." He'd be run out of town on a rail. And onward to the crisis of disconnection. The Copernican revolution, despite its brilliant impact in both science and philosophy, ended up leaving us inhabiting a cold, purposeless universe in which the appearance of humankind shows up only as a cosmological accident, an epiphenomenon of matter. Far from being at the very center of a divinely ordained and ordered cosmos, which was then believed, we found ourselves radically decentered, condemned to exist as the sole beings that are endowed with intelligence and purpose, yet in a silent, mindless, aimless, mechanical universe. In many preceding eras and cultures, human beings have felt a deep sense of connection with the world, seen, for example, in their willingness to listen to the various ways that nature spoke to them. In the medieval Christian times, the natural world was regarded as an expression of God's glory and benevolence. In our post-Copernican world, however, we experience a profound cosmic loneliness. Nature no longer has anything to say and remains silent in the face of our analytical probings. Adrift in a boundaryless realm of space and time, devoid of a spiritual dimension to our lives, we find it increasingly hard to make sense of ourselves or our reason for existing. The universe has become disenchanted. This sense of deep and seemingly ineradicable loneliness and disconnection is beginning to seep into our bones. We can see it at a very practical level, for example, in the epidemic of depression now sweeping much of the Western world. We also recognize its symptoms in our loss of community life, even in our relationships with one another. There are a growing number of people choosing to live alone. In our business organizations, we are failing to find opportunities to pursue fulfilling lives. Instead, we become obsessed with a single game called more, faster, and short-term profits, regardless of the cost in terms of the impoverishment of human relationships and the loss of the dignity of work. Even medicine and some schools of psychology have contributed to our sense of disconnectedness and alienation from the universe by stripping human beings of any spiritual dimension. We no longer sense our dependence on one another and on the universe, which used to be seen as our fundamentally benevolent source. Our whole understanding of ourselves has, as a consequence, been profoundly affected. We are losing the balance between our individuality, our community, and nature. A loss that goes right along with the reductionism of Western science, which raises the status of the parts over that of the whole. Blind to our multiple connections with the world, instead of seeing life as an opportunity to serve, we fall into a mood of ingratitude. We consider ourselves to be primarily the worthy recipient, while failing to engage in any kind of reciprocity, let alone generosity. Just as we become disconnected from nature and society, we also become alienated from ourselves, particularly in regard to our emotions and our bodies. This may at first seem puzzling in this age of psychotherapy. Perhaps we should see the growing demand for psychotherapy as itself a measure of the degree of our emotional and physical malaise. What has arisen in response to our sense of alienation, of course, is the pervasive self-help movement. As anyone who buys books knows, the self-help section in most bookstores is usually one of the largest. No doubt such a flood of advice regarding how to live is not all misguided. Clearly, many people are genuinely helped by this trend, but much of this guidance appears to be aimed at learning to manipulate ourselves, just as we have dedicated ourselves to acquire knowledge in order to manipulate and control nature. Unfortunately, this is not a very effective approach to the learning that appears to be needed, precisely because it focuses attention on the isolated self. It is true that we are individuals, born with particular predispositions, but we tend to forget that culture, society, and nature are also dimensions of self. One clear sign of this radical impoverishment of our sources is a pervasive lack of passion in our personal and professional lives. We hold passion as an opposite of intelligence. It is a common occurrence to encounter people who consider us foolish or naive if we dare to show passion for anything. Passion can be understood as a mystical act, constituting nothing less than a predisposition to fuse with the world. Whether we lose ourselves in a task that we are deeply engaged in, or melt together with another person in the act of making love, passion shows up as an experience of merging with our surroundings. The act of service may also engender passion, as we are drawn to become ourselves in the act of aiding and supporting others. Passion, then, is the emotion of connectedness par excellence. We unquestionably need moments of passion in order to lead healthy, fulfilling, satisfying lives. But how can we experience passion when we find ourselves living disconnectedly in a meaningless world? What we are left with all too often is passion limited to the physical act of sex and little else, a situation that renders our lives dry and deeply unsatisfying. And finally, the crisis in learning. This sense of disconnectedness also spills over into the realm of education. Our view of learning is deeply affected by the pervasiveness of this rationalistic, scientific worldview. Just as knowledge is about acquisition, manipulation, and consumption, so learning, as currently organized in our schools and colleges, has come to be centered on accumulating and utilizing information. But learning is not just about gathering and applying information to produce ever more effective action in the world. This reductionist view of schooling is quite antagonistic to the broader traditional ideal of education as a means to learn how to live both wisely and well in our world. Is it any wonder then that our children are completely turned off by school, seeing it as more or less irrelevant to their future beyond the acquisition of a certain set of credentials? These crises that have arisen from the progressive outworking of these dominant factors in Western culture, together with the general lack of balance that they have generated, produce breakdowns that we encounter again and again on the personal, community, governmental, and breakdowns in leadership. Our task is to embrace our difficulties in a mood of complete honesty, openness, and acceptance. Let us remind ourselves that the seeds of change are contained in the difficulties themselves. This is our task, to reconnect and reestablish our natural union with the universe. In the West, we have for centuries focused on separating ourselves from the world, from the universe, accumulating knowledge for the sake of better understanding and exploiting its resources, including what in the business world we now call human resources. This has been carried out using rationalistic scientific modes of thinking that have proved extraordinarily powerful in accomplishing this task. This critique of Western thinking is not intended in any way as an outright rejection. That would be absurd. What we are aiming for here is to achieve a better balance by integrating the Eastern emphasis on contemplation and merging with the Western focus on analytical understanding and effective action. Such an integration would overcome the historical but unnecessary antagonism between these two diverging paths, taking hold of the best of each tradition. To be more precise, it is the recognition that the process of fusion and separation constitutes the dynamic aspect of what it is to be human in this world. When we merge, we connect. But the very nature of fusing means that we are often unaware of the intrinsic nature of the connection. Correspondingly, when we become observers, we step away from the world for the sake of understanding and of generating effective action. Addressing the pressing issues of today's world requires that we master both dimensions of this dynamic. We need to bring them into balance, while at the same time acknowledging the mystery that ultimately underlies them both. Welcome to the Conavision podcast. I am Jim Conrad, joined by John Good. John, nice to have you here.
I'm feeling very important today, Jim.
As well you should. You're a VIP. You're on the Conavision podcast. I'll let the audience in on a little fact that I know about you. Your last name is Good, and your family is rather famous in Vancouver, in broadcasting.
Well, they're well known in Western Canada.
Western Canada.
Yeah, my father and my brother.
So your father was Bill Good Sr., and your brother is Bill Good, longtime CBC anchor.
Well, I remember it as my father was Bill Good,
yes,
and my brother is Bill Good Jr. And then somewhere along the way, as my father aged and retired, and my brother became more prominent in the community, he dropped the junior.
Yes.
And they called the old man senior. So nobody seemed to mind that. It was... And I came along. I was employed out here in the West, starting out in my career. I actually did work out East for quite a few years, and they never did.
So they were Western Canadian broadcasters, but you went back East. Now, being from a broadcasting family and then being the youngest and getting into broadcasting, did the name help you?
That's a really good question. It had an influence. I wouldn't use the word help, and I've never really thought about it right now because there were There were negative connotations to that. And by that I mean being quite a bit younger and in a competitive profession. I kind of got into the business really accidentally. And my brother, on the other hand, had planned his whole life. I never planned 15 minutes ahead for anything. I left home young. I left home early. I left school early.
Because if there is no plan, there is no failure.
Oh, yes, there is. There can be failure. And I once heard someone say, I don't believe in failure. I believe that you succeed or you learn something. That was Peter Brown, who's a well-known financial businessman in Canada. He's a friend, a colleague, and in a way a mentor, Peter. But yeah, he said a lot of really important things that I remembered. So when you say, did it help? It's funny. In those days, we all started pretty young. And I remember, as I said, I got into the business accidentally. I was actually working at a car dealership. I'd left Vancouver. I was 17 or 18, left school, went to work in Williams Lake. And a colleague of my father came through town, and my father had asked him to say hello. Anyways, Larry Rose showed up and saw me in my misery in the car dealership and said, look, maybe you'd like to consider something in the radio business. I'm heading off to the Kootenays.
And he wouldn't have tigged on that had he not known that you were from a broadcasting family.
Well, I knew Larry because I had met him in Vancouver, and he worked with my father. But he stopped and he said, well, he's a really nice guy. And he said, and I was having fun in Williams Lake. I mean, I was, 18, 17 years old. I mean, who's not having fun?
Selling cars.
Well, I wasn't really selling cars. I was not selling cars.
Yeah.
But I was having fun anyways because I did other things at the dealership and tried to sell cars. And it was really interesting to be associated at such a young age with some grizzled old veteran salesmen who were war veterans.
Yeah.
I mean, this was the late 60s. So these guys had actually been in the war, came back, had jobs, and they were like really salt-of-the-earth people. Larry came through, and I had been there for maybe a few months. And I said, well, I'll give it a shot because there's a formerly well-known, David Hoole.
Yes.
His father, Lloyd Hoole, and his partner owned a small radio station in Cranbrook. So I was offered the job. So I got on my motorcycle and made my way over to Cranbrook.
What were you riding then?
A Triumph Bonneville. It was 1958. I mean, in those days, I started working real young.
Now, was that because we know each other, you've talked about this, and I had another guest on the show, hockey player, Alec Tidy, who we both know, who was dyslexic and is dyslexic, and that is your story as well.
I am dyslexic.
Yes.
Yeah. And in my case, it gets worse.
Okay.
In education in those days, it was an affliction, I call it, or I'm not sure what the technical term is, but that's what I call it. I refer to it. I didn't know I had those challenges. I was just a pretty normal, average kid up until I went to school. And then there were obvious glaring challenges.
You couldn't read like the other kids.
No.
Yeah.
Or write or print or even understand certain patterns in the same way that other people, especially peers, would. So long story short is because of that affliction, you do develop other skills, and one of the skills is concealing. Long story short, I faked it till about grade 8, and then when math became more complex than arithmetic, it was hopeless. So I guess I acted out in certain ways, and the acting out led to a place where the school authorities and my family negotiated an exit.
There was an exit strategy
there was.
negotiated.
Yeah.
Yes.
But by that time I was, 15 or 16, and I was 6 feet tall, and I went to work. I went to work in a steel mill when I was 16, punching a clock. I can still remember it was called Napco Industries, and we took tanks, Army tanks, that were shipped over here, and they were altered and modified into spar trees for logging. Now, I don't know whether you know this, but tanks are powered by aircraft engines.
Was that the hardest job you ever had?
Well, that's a good question. No. Well, it might have been, but I didn't think of it as that hard. It wasn't what I considered to be what I wanted for a career. So, but the steel mill was, it's almost like you're living in another dimension. I figured that wasn't really what I wanted to do. So somehow or another, I made my way out of the city, and I went looking for a job. There was a Welshman, a Welsh Jew by the name of Tom Mason, who was the mayor of Williams Lake, and he owned the car dealership. So I just went in there one day and asked for a job, and I was hired.
That leads me to my next question. What ratio of luck to choice has there been in your life and your career?
Yeah, that's a really, really good topic. And it gets better as I get older, because I believe that luck has a lot more to do with everything that's really important in my own life than I ever thought that it did before. I really appreciate my good luck.
But you made a choice to go to Williams Lake and made a choice to walk into a car dealership and ask for a job, and they took a chance on you.
Well, they did, yeah, and it worked out for everybody. I don't think I've ever left a place where there were ever any hard feelings or bad vibes. You know, when I started that job in Cranbrook, I knew nothing. Even though I came from a media family, I knew nothing.
So it was a bit into your bones, almost through osmosis. You knew a little bit about media.
I did, yeah, that's true.
But practically speaking, you had no experience.
None. I had no idea what to do in front of a microphone.
So getting into radio and understanding it finally and learning about it, was that the bug that got you hooked into broadcasting?
Well, you know, it's I never went to college, but you know, I'm just thinking that maybe that was a bit like college would be for people that actually went to university, because it was just a bunch of teenagers like me. I just turned 18, and it was a great place to start in that business for me, because people were generally pretty nice. I mean, there were some people that were resentful.
Oh,
without knowing me.
Yeah,
just
he only got the gig because he's Bill Good's son,
or something like that, or my brother's brother, or something like that, and
he's only here because of the name.
Right. So I did have to suffer some of the resentment, and it was acted out on me. Yeah. You know, there were some hurtful moments of people being cruel, and I didn't understand that, because that's not who I am.
Well, no one could ever accuse broadcasters or media people of being insecure.
Right. Well, I'm right at the top of the list, right? But most of the people were pretty good-natured and helpful, and you know, the characters that populated that place. I mean, there was I think his name was Ken White, an ex-professional hockey player. He was the sports director, and he would just come in and he'd be smoking a cigar, and you know, it's radio, they can't see you. And he'd be in a room like our control studio here with his feet up and reading the sports, and you know, he'd just come in with 5 seconds before airtime and talk about sports for 5 or 10 minutes and then leave.
So from Cranbrook to Prince George?
Yeah. You might know the name Paul Carson.
Yes. A sports broadcaster here in Vancouver for many years.
Yeah. And Paul was the morning man at that radio station. Just thinking about it, we lived in a motel.
Well, that's convenient.
Yeah, a motel, and there was a trailer park. I mean, the community this place was full of loggers and miners and guys that worked on, you know, electrical high wires, putting in the infrastructure, a lot of drinking. There was fights in the pub. It was, you know, that was a small town.
So then from radio, you found a gig back on the coast in Victoria.
Well, very quick history. Cranbrook, I was ambitious. I wanted to leave there and get a better job, and everybody wants to get back to the big smoke. In BC, it's Vancouver or Toronto, you know, Canadian. And so I sent out tapes and did all the things that everybody did, and I didn't stay in one place for very long. So I went from Cranbrook to Prince George, where John Ashbridge was the news director. He hired me. From there, I went to CJVI in Victoria.
And that's where you roomed with another sports broadcasting icon from Vancouver, the late, great Neil McRae.
Neil McRae, yeah. Neil and I were roommates in Victoria. We had a small house in Oak Bay.
What was that like?
We had 2 dogs, Fred and Barney, and Neil was a slob. Neil was a great guy, and he had a big heart, and anybody that doesn't know him might not know that, but he was a terrific person. We were very good friends for many years. So I went from Victoria to CJOR because I had worked as a copy boy somewhere along the line before the steel mill. I had worked at the Sun part-time.
Newspaper Sun in Vancouver.
For Erwin Swangard, who was the managing editor of the Sun. So Erwin, by that time, had some falling out with Pacific Press or Southern, whoever owned it at the time. And he went to work for Jimmy Pattison, who owned CJOR. And I was hired there as a sports broadcaster.
at CJOR in 1960?
70 maybe.
1970?
Yeah. 71 maybe.
And so that began you went sort of from being a DJ to getting into sports.
Yeah. I was presented an opportunity to audition for a CBC replacement television job here, and I didn't get the job. But somebody in Toronto saw the tape, and I was offered a job in Toronto for CBC.
CBC Sports Toronto.
Right.
So you're 20 years old. You were just working as a sports reporter for OR.
Right.
Somebody sees your television audition tape and decides that's the guy that we want on TV, standing up at the microphone with the famous CBC jacket, doing commentary on sports.
Well, sports reporting.
Sports reporting.
Yeah, and including anchoring the sports. And so I did not expect to get a job offer. I was told I didn't get the job in Vancouver. And so I forgot about it. And a few days later, I got a phone call from a guy by the name of George Retzlaff. George was famously known. He was head of sports in Toronto, but he was famously known for inventing slow motion replay in hockey.
Wow.
And he had also devised the camera work, the way that the cameras operate in hockey games at ice level.
Revolutionizing coverage of hockey.
Yeah, he was a brilliant guy, but he was also an alcoholic and a difficult personality. But he liked me, and he wanted to hire me. So it's funny because I went to my brother and I went to my father, and I said, I've been offered this job in Toronto.
Television.
Right. And here's the money, and here's the opportunity. And the money was good. It was quite a bit more than I would probably have made staying at that radio job in 5 years. I asked them for their advice, and both of them said, no, don't do it. So I immediately said yes, because I couldn't resist the allure of Toronto, for one thing.
Now, why do you think they said no?
Well, I think they probably correctly surmised that I wasn't really ready for prime time, and they were right. So I went to Toronto and went to hell for a while. I had to visit hell.
Yeah, you were on the air, and it wasn't a good experience. Could you classify it as a failure?
Well, it was a work in progress.
It was a learning experience.
Yeah, well, here's what happened. I arrived in Toronto. They had arranged for me, and this is actually a good side story, because there was a very fancy, high-end motor hotel, which is like a motel, but really, really advanced and upscale at that time. And nobody had ever heard of it out here, but it was a business was started in Toronto by a guy by the name of Isidore Sharp, and it was the Four Seasons first hotel.
Wow.
With a fancy dining room and elaborate accessories, and the hotel was beautiful. And so they put me up there for a week, and I had to start work right away, basically the next day. So I went in, and I was kind of shown around a bit, a desk I could occupy, and then I was shown where the studio. I'd never been except for the audition in a TV studio. They didn't know this. I don't think anybody knew this.
So, and no one bothered to ask you, John, do you have any television experience?
No one asked me that. They assumed that I did.
Because you made an audition.
Right. And I came from Vancouver, so they didn't have any idea what I'd been doing in Vancouver. For all they knew, I'd been on TV for 5 years over there. And so I have to go down to the studio, and I'm shown where I'm going to sit. And sitting beside me, or in the seat next to me, is Lloyd Robertson, who is famous out here for doing the National in those days at 11 or 10 o'clock at night. But what most people out here didn't know is that Lloyd did the 6 o'clock CBLT TV news in Toronto every day, and then he did the National at night. And he did other things too, but great guy. So I'm sitting next to him, and I had my script, which was I had been writing for radio and not for television. So they were expecting 6 or 8 minutes. I gave them like a minute and a half. Or 2 minutes. And so it was awkward. A lot of ad-libbing for a few minutes. And the lights are...
The lights are hot.
It's hot. Yeah. You're at the beach.
So television, Toronto, you're 20 years old. That gig didn't last long because of politics?
It lasted a few years. Okay. But what happened there was I had a similar experience with the resentments from other people.
Right.
Because I came out of Vancouver. Who does this
hotshot
guy
young
think
kid,
he is?
Sports reporter.
Really doesn't know much. I mean, I did a good job on the air, but I was very inexperienced in certainly any of the technical stuff, videotape, how to even put stuff together. So I got the hang of it, but there was underlying resentments, and I had to deal with that. I was making good money. I was doing my job, But I was really young.
Yeah.
Like the next youngest guy in sports in Canada on CBC was probably 35. That would be like Tom McKee, and there was Don Chevrier and Whitman and all these guys. I would end up working with all these guys over the years. But I was kind of lonely in Toronto. You know, it was a big city, really big city from what I'd been used to. And
When did the next job offer come?
so I got kind of disillusioned in Toronto, and one of the executives, one of the producers of that supper time show, Bryn Matthews is his name, he was moving back to Ottawa to work for a CTV affiliate, CGOH, and he really liked me. And I think he could see that I was, having trouble with these guys in Toronto, and he offered me a job, and it was a CTV affiliate. And so I accepted it and quit, resigned, went up to Ottawa, and one of the best experiences of my life. It was life-altering.
So you're the evening sports anchor at CJOH in Ottawa.
Yeah, I went in there, and there's a fellow by the name of Max Keeping, who was a renowned humanitarian. He was a news guy, and Max befriended me. I got there in early fall, and it was my birthday coming up, and Max was also a newfie who liked his rum and his beer and his parties every day. Mm-hmm. And he was a terrific journalist, a really amazing human being. So the first thing that he did was he announced to everyone in Ottawa that there would be an international Johnny B. Good night at Molly Maguire's pub.
And your middle initial is B.
It is.
Yes.
So, I mean, I had to grow up with that.
Uh-huh.
It was no fun when I was 10, but it works for me now.
Johnny B. Good night in Ottawa.
At Molly Maguire's, and a lot of people showed up. It was a great party, and that's how I was introduced to Ottawa. And I got into the community a little bit up there and really enjoyed it. By that time, I knew a little about how to operate on television. My partner was a guy named Brian Smith, who was an ex-hockey player, and Max was there, and there were a lot of young people. By the time I got to Ottawa, I was only 24, and I'd had 4 or 5 years in television.
So now Ottawa, back to Vancouver?
So after a few years in Ottawa, not very many, 2 or 3, I was getting a little tired of the cold. It was minus 20, just a bit too long, 25, 30 sometimes. Ottawa's even that much colder than Toronto. I was getting sick of the winter, so I came back to Vancouver for a little break. It was March. My brother picked me up at the airport. It was minus 20 in Ottawa. Flew to Vancouver. We're driving down Granville, about 16th and Granville. The daffodils are out, and there's a guy jogging with his dog in his shorts. And that's where I made the decision.
As a lot of expatriates do. They go away, but they end up coming back.
So guess what's happening in Vancouver? Daryl Duke and Norman Clemlin are starting out, and Bill Bellman, as an investor, had created Western Approaches, which was developing CKVU television. And the Whitecaps were trying to make a name for themselves here as well at the same time. So I was able to engineer. Daryl wanted me to come here and help him launch this TV station and be one of the sports guys. He had hired a former ABC Vancouverite, but an ABC veteran sports producer by the name of Lorne Hassan. Lorne had crashed and burned in New York. He used to be the producer of Wide World of Sports. Daryl found him working in a dry cleaners in Vancouver and hired him because he believed in him. And he was right, because it was Lorne that really developed Sports Page.
So you were at the very beginning of what became a kind of an institution in Vancouver sports for quite a while, which was Sports Page.
Yeah, that's right. I was the first host. First night, September 5th, 1977.
But you were also anchoring the CKVU Evening News as well.
That was after.
Okay.
We did Sports Page for 2 years, 77, 78. And by 1979, I had actually created First News. I wanted to, we didn't have a news program. We had the Vancouver show with Mike Winlaw and Pierre Chandel and the Frenchman. Yeah. He was great. We're both Scorpios, and he was an intense guy, but we had a lot of fun. He was a big deal from out east, yeah. and he was a really qualified journalist and really erudite, amazing person. So Pia was there, and it was a lot of fun. And, Daryl would bark orders from up above in the ivory tower, and everybody was scurrying, running, and hiding. But I got along really well with Daryl, and they really liked what the sports department was doing. So Lorne cleaned himself up and came in and organized this whole thing and developed this legendary show.
But you then convinced Daryl and the powers that be that they needed an evening news show.
Right.
First News. And you were the anchor.
I was alone doing it for about a year.
Yeah.
And then Daryl got the idea that he wanted to have me to have a female co-anchor. So there was a very young reporter named Joanna Puros.
That's right.
And Joanna and I did the news together for as long as I continued to stay at the station, which was probably another year and a half or 2 years. And she stayed and I left, and she was great, and we became very good friends.
So you decided to get out of television and into the corporate video world. Was that something lucky, or was that a choice?
Well, again,
Bit of both.
I had been married in Florida, but that marriage wasn't working out too well. So I was getting a divorce, and I met somebody else, and I married Caroline, and all her brothers were stockbrokers or traders.
Howe Street traders.
Yeah. She was the very much younger daughter of a family of mostly older boys. She was quite mature and a bit younger than me. So we got married, and I started, getting involved in some trading on the brokerage side while I was still working in television. And then I was approached by some people in the resource business. With my television exposure, I was getting some attention downtown. I joined a health club there. I got to know some of the promoters.
Getting a rep.
Making friends
Yeah.
in the business community. But because of my wife's family of brokers, I was getting closer to some of these financial guys. And so I recognized that there was
Opportunity.
but there was a disconnect between the business world and the media. Howe Street was misunderstood, I thought, and so did the business people. And it turned out that the media just didn't really understand what was going on down here. And it's funny because I think a lot of media guys in those days, I found this in the sports world as well. If they don't understand something, they have a tendency to ignore it or criticize it. That helped me I promoted the soccer team as well.
Right. To Whitecaps.
Yeah. That's how I helped them succeed by developing a format of I had all the games taped because I don't know whether I mentioned, but I went to work for the Whitecaps and the TV station when I engineered that move out here because they couldn't afford to pay me what I was getting in Toronto.
And the Whitecaps didn't have a TV deal.
No, until Lauren and I started to develop a really good relationship with the soccer team. Then we started airing games. So then what I wanted to say about promoting the soccer team, because I was a director of the soccer team and public relations director while I was doing the sports at CKVU. They both paid me a salary. I had other benefits. As I said, they couldn't pay me what I was getting in Toronto, but I wanted to be here. So it was really a friendly deal between both entities. But the soccer team weren't getting any crowds. And they weren't even playing that well, but they were working really hard. They were great people, management of that team. And so I knew all the media guys because of my history in sports and my contacts. So I held weekly press conferences at Empire Stadium. Because I invited them, because I knew them, they would come, and I'd have the staff and players of the soccer team be there. They got to know these guys. I videotaped the games, and I'd have the coaches and the players talk about things that
So you were creating content.
We were
for
helping
these
educate
sports guys.
We were helping educate the Canadian guys. There were a few European reporters, German guy, British guy, and they were giving a lot of press, but they had a limited audience. So pretty soon, the rest of the media, CTV and all the other stations, radio, then the team started winning. But the press box was full by the end of that season.
Yeah.
And then the team was winning and the fans were coming in a year and a half later or something.
They won the
They
championship.
beat the New York Cosmos, yeah. First championship team in Vancouver, since the 64 Lions.
The transition then to pivot to strictly business.
VHS and Betamax were coming to boardrooms. Companies were promoting their images with videos and things like this.
So the corporate video became a thing.
And so I had a pretty good business running. I had a really good product. I hired the best technical people and camera people, and I used the best equipment from the TV world. And so I made a really good product, and I got a really good price for it. And we helped these companies raise a lot of money because they'd take these tools and go overseas, and they go see bankers and brokers in different countries, and they raised money, a lot of money. And then I had an idea for a TV show.
And the TV show was?
Venture. Which I started as venture capital and then sold it to CBC 2 years later because it was too much work and I couldn't make any money. But they liked the concept, and then it ran for 20 years as venture, I think.
So then the transition then, getting out of the corporate video world and just becoming an investor, because you started to know people, understood the business. Would you say that you had a knack for making a deal?
Well, I found that I had a knack for being a good salesman. When I had to commercialize my skill, Murray Pesum was one of my clients, and I charged him, I forget what it was, 50 or 100 grand for this. But they made a discovery at Hemelo. It was a big deal. And so I had done all that whole documentary. And when he paid me the last installment on the contract, he lifted his glasses up onto his forehead, and he had his accountant come in to write me a check for 50 grand. And he said, I'm thinking, what's wrong? I didn't know if I'm going to get the money. And he said, if you're taking $50,000 bills out of my back pocket, I want you working for me. So he hired me.
He hired you.
Yeah. So then I got into the finance end of the market.
And have you been doing that ever since?
Pretty much. I found I had a knack for a certain part of the business that was really specialized. And I think this might have something to do, going all the way back to my dyslexic personality. And that is making markets in stocks, because it's kind of an abstract function.
So pull that apart for me. Making markets in stocks.
Well, you've got buyers and sellers, and in a liquid market, you've got a lot of buyers and sellers, and you have to have a sense of how to coordinate. It's called an orderly market for the securities. So it's one of those things I discovered I had accidentally, because I had to do it one day for somebody, and it came naturally to me.
So there was the luck.
Yeah.
And then there was the discovery that,
right.
Hey, I've got the knack at this. So you always have buyers and you always have sellers.
No, you don't.
But they both
You always have sellers.
They both need each other.
So I have an inventory.
Yeah.
And I supply both sides. I have an inventory of stock and I have an inventory of cash.
What have you learned in working in financial markets in London? You've been in New York, you've been in Los Angeles, you've been in Toronto, you've been here, all over the world. Is there a common thread, something that you've learned in order to be successful?
Be careful.
Be careful. Do your due diligence?
Well, as much as you can, yeah. The most important, it's funny because this came up just a few days ago. My answer to a professional colleague who might ask how I'm doing is a younger person. Usually I will say, well, I've been around this business for a long time, but I'm still having trouble being able to find a reliable crystal ball. So every day is dangerous. It's not a business where you can really go to sleep.
Is it, I guess, correct to say that it's a form of gambling?
Yes. No hesitation.
And you are a gambler?
Yes.
Does making a deal and having something hit, like standing at the craps table or the poker table and winning, is it the same feeling?
Yes. Better.
Because it's more money. Yeah.
And it's a steady job sometimes, you can't survive in a casino.
Some people try.
Well, yes, they do.
Yeah.
I've tried that. I'm here to tell you that's the hardest job that I've ever tried to do in Las Vegas.
It's just try to be a professional gambler.
It's hard. Those guys are good.
Yeah.
And they know what they're doing, and they'll wear you down.
What is the future of modern economies and where we're going? What will be our salvation and or what will be our downfall?
Well, I won't be here to see it.
Exactly.
But I've come to the conclusion that there is so much money. Every day there is more money and more money and more money being dedicated to the gambling. At the same time, the technological advances of humans in our culture connected to business. When I was first starting out as a promoter, there was maybe 1 or 2 or 3% of people actually professionally or even invested in the markets. And now it's, I don't know what it is, but it's high double digits for sure.
Well, and the fact that the internet has now made everybody a day trader. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It means more money in the market, but is that money substantial?
Yes.
Okay.
It's enormous.
Okay.
It's unimaginable. People are living their lives and they're, concerned with all the things that they're doing in their day, and even the really successful guys. But I think I have some advantage as a former journalist, newsman, media guy, and it helped me. It helped me in my career as somebody trying to be right, aka lucky and right, in picking an industry or a company or a sector or a movement in where the energy's going, because growing up working, especially starting so young in the media, the same people that listen to you on the radio or watch you on television are the same people that buy stocks.
True that.
And invest. Mm-hmm. And so I think I had a bit of an advantage in the business world because I could sense a movement of the audience. And being a journalist, you have a sense, and really you just need a little bit of an edge sometimes to be making the right decision of where the human interest is going to be. I laugh about all of the so-called advancements in our technology and our smartphones and everything else, but I always remember that the platform really hasn't changed in 50 or 60 or 75 years. It's a picture and it's a box with sound, and that's the way it's always been. Maybe it'll be an implant in our brain sometime, but
a holographic image.
I mean, I say to my children and my children's friends who are in the business now that you'll all be billionaires.
Eventually.
Well, you can do things with your telephone that we couldn't even do 25
computing
years
power
ago. I can trade. I can move money from my bank to my brokerage in less than 2 minutes.
And you can react.
And I can make a trade.
And you can react to a market change or an event immediately.
24 hours a day. And I can do it with my hand. I don't need to pick up a phone. I don't need to talk to a human. So that's where it's going.
So what have you learned in your varied and illustrious career?
Well, okay, let's start with this. One of the things that I have learned is that everybody's good at something. Everybody's really good at something. I don't think you know what it is necessarily. Maybe if you're entering the NHL at 19, you've already got that part. But I think most of the rest of us live into the things that we're going to be or do. And there's so much to learn. One of the things I've learned in being on the planet for 10 million years is that...
give or take.
Yeah, give or take, is that there's so much more to learn. One of the things I learned was...
So never stop learning.
No. Now, I'm at a place where, at my age now, mortality is something I think about not every waking moment, but, every morning, sometimes at night.
It's lurking.
Yeah. So, the gas tank is less full technically than it's just, I can't get out of this, right? It's happening.
Yeah. So what you've learned is that you have to develop a relationship with fear.
Well,
or identify it and be conscious of it and understand that cannot stop you from doing what your instincts tell you to do.
That's right. But sometimes your instincts are protective.
Yeah.
Right? In my case, not so much. I live pretty recklessly, which is, brings us to another term or topic that you and I have talked about, and that's luck.
What's the ratio between luck and choice in your career and in your life?
It's complex, but maybe not all that complicated in my life, because I had the instinct to seek adventure, how I recognized something exciting and I wanted to pursue it. And I did, and it was successful. And it led to the next thing, and then the next thing. And so I was lucky because I learned to not be afraid of the changes. And my brother, I remember him telling me once, years later, by this time I'm 10 or 15 years into other careers, investment banking, things like that. And he said, I don't know how you live like this. Because he had a really good, well-paying, high-profile job that he was really good at. And he was getting paid every year by somebody, and he knew it was coming. I had no idea where I was going to be making my money next year. Maybe for some years I had some ideas, but there were rude interruptions, stock market crashes, other things that happen in life that put you out of work.
One of the keys to being a good entrepreneurial businessman is relationships, and also being a great salesman.
Personal contact and learning from, I garnered, absorbed information and clues from other successful people, because everywhere that I went, there were people that were way more successful than me at that moment. And so I paid attention to their behavior, to their manners, their etiquette, their business approach, their social interaction with people, and I learned a lot from that. So these guys are good teachers because they're already successful, and in most cases, very generous with time and energy and resources to help someone else be good at it. So I think that maybe that's something about salesmen that I'm not sure it exists in all other professions. In fact, I know that it doesn't, because I've been unpleasantly surprised at people in business who fear the people who are successful because I think they are insecure. And that can lead to backroom politics that can be very disturbing, but also causes, financial trouble and lots of real personal problems with personnel because of someone else's fears, projecting onto you. First of all, I think you have to have a positive energy. I've always been an optimist. Even at the worst of times, I've always felt that I can make things better, or I can find a way to get things to be better. Not that I'm the guy that's going to make it happen, but the forces around me, if you can assemble the energy from different people and recognize the opportunity.
So when you say to me, Jim, all I need is one more miracle.
Right.
What do you mean by that?
I do say that, don't I?
You do say that. What do you mean by that?
Well, since we started out talking about the long distant past and those opportunities, it's gotten me thinking. It's not so different today than it was 50 years ago or 40. So I'm looking for that moment or whatever, whether it's seeing, reading, or hearing, or detecting the opportunity. Because at this stage of my life, I think I'm generally pretty good at recognizing where there might be an opportunity. And I have pioneered a few different things in business along the way. So I'm optimistic that I have time for one more miracle to get me out of the trouble I'm in now, right? So being a promoter and a salesman and a businessman and not the most organized person. Get people around you that are organized. That's another really important thing. I'm not. You're looking at a man that's never opened a piece of mail. So, I explained in our interview that I'm dyslexic. And so that created a whole bunch of baggage for me going forward, because people can't look at you and see that you're dyslexic. They just see that there's something going on there. They don't know why. I'm ADHD and I've got all that other stuff going. But I can really focus on certain energies and really accomplish what I think are the important things in that task or with that group. But don't put me somewhere else in there, and people have made that mistake. I show up with all the energy and all the ideas, and then they think they can all go to sleep, make me the president, and then they don't have to do any work. That's happened, and it fails because I can't do all that work. I don't want to do all that work, and I shouldn't be doing all that work. So that's where the tension comes in when people have agendas who don't have some of those skills of the energy and so on. There some of them can be very good lawyers and very good accountants, but then they want to have control of things, but they're not qualified. So that makes things complicated. So then you get to a place where you learn to recognize those potential dangers, avoid those kinds of people, and populate the audience with other people like you. It's like I had a guy in Toronto once, a fellow by the name of David Goldman, who's been a very good friend of mine for years, businessman, and he once described it as playing in a band. You want to have guys around that know they can sit down and just start playing in the band, like it's a jam session. And I thought that was a really good analogy.
And they know their part.
Well, it just works, because nobody's jealous, nobody's envious. They're just playing the instrument that they're good at playing, and other people let them do that. And the business grows.
And the greater good is making a wonderful sound.
It is, yeah.
Would you categorize yourself as a overachiever?
Well, I don't know. Not consciously. I think, I have other challenges. I'm bipolar. I'm going to talk very candidly here about these things, but I couldn't read and write, so I became a very good listener and watcher. I could see all the movements. I listened to everything, especially what people had to say. So once I had achieved some measure of success in my early 20s, and then moved into the business world from broadcasting later on, that same decade, I carried those skills with me. I listened real carefully to guys like Peter Brown and Murray Pezim and Bruce McDonald and all these guys that are a bit, in some cases, quite a bit older than me.
What's the biggest thing you've learned?
That nobody's ever had an original thought.
We rediscover knowledge.
And we can predict certain things, some with acute accuracy, actually, in people's behavior. And not only people's behavior, but other things. I think primarily I'm a student of history and philosophy and information from thousands of years ago. Those guys knew what they were doing. Human behavior in many forms hasn't changed that much. And so if you study those things and then you live long enough and you have, I didn't just work at one job in one town for my whole career, which some people do. I came back here and I run into people periodically who I knew from my early childhood who never left town, never left the village that I grew up in. So I came back here and I've had a little more, I would say I've had a more adventurous life. I don't know that it's any better than their life. I don't think I'd be very happy staying in one place for too long, even now.
Well, I'm glad you're here, right now, talking with us. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Jim. Good to see you again.
Episode 9 of the Conovision podcast. My thanks to John Good for giving us his knowledge plus his experience, equaling his wisdom. As well, Julio Olalla, founder of Newfield Research, and his essay on the crises of the Western mind. And we began with questions about the nature of reality and the reality of nature. Hopefully, you have been enlightened by listening. Thank you. Until next time, remember, we are all stories to be told. I'm Jim Conrad, and this has been Conovision, the spirit of storytelling.